Benne. I teach Christian ethics at the Institute for Lutheran Theology based in Brookings, South Dakota, and I'm doing this for CORE, for Dennis Nelson, an old friend and head of an organization that confesses Orthodox Lutheran teachings. And one of the things he's doing is collecting videos on crucial Christian teachings, Lutheran teachings particularly. And what I'm going to do is a short piece here on vocation. A teaching of Luther that has had great historical effect is his teaching on vocation. Protesting the Roman Catholic arrangement in which the clergy had callings of higher religious and moral significance than the laity, Luther taught that all Christians have callings or vocations, and that all callings are equal in moral and religious seriousness. They only differ in function. This teaching, along with Calvin's version of it, unleashed unprecedented commitment and energy to worldly work in the Western world. To comment on that, the great sociologist Max Weber offered this: but at least one thing in the Lutheran Reformation was unquestionably new: the valuation of the fulfillment of duty in worldly affairs as the highest form which the moral activity the individual could assume. This it was which inevitably gave everyday worldly activity a religious significance, and which first created the conception of calling in this sense, that this moral justification of worldly activity was one of the most important results of the Reformation, especially Luther's part of it, is beyond doubt and may be even considered a platitude. Paralleling his teaching on the priesthood of all believers, Luther taught that all Christians are called by God through Christ to be his beloved and forgiven children, and that they need no mediators to receive that graceful call directly from Christ. At the same time, however, Christians who receive that grace through Christ become priests to their neighbors, mediating God's love through them as conduits to the neighbor. They do that very concretely in their vocations. Luther outlines these features of the Christian life paradoxically in his The Freedom of the Christian. Quote, this is what he says: the Christian is perfectly free, Lord of all, subject to none. Same time, the Christian is perfectly dutiful, servant of all, subject to all. The gospel frees Christians from all worldly sources of salvation. Nothing can cancel out the promises of God in Christ. Their eternal destiny is assured. At the same time, however, Christians turn toward the neighbor as servants. Called by God to be his sons and daughters eternally, Christians are also called to serve their neighbors through their various callings they have been given in their particular histories. Their faith becomes active in love. Galatians 5:6. As Luther put it in his preface to the epistle of Paul to the Romans, oh, it is a busy, active, mighty thing, this faith, and so it is impossible for it not to do good works incessantly. Thus Christians become conduits of God's love, received through Christ and offered to the neighbor in the various places of responsibility they have been given. For Luther, Christians do not need to cast about for places to exercise their obedience. They were given in the orders of creation into which each Christian was inevitably placed: marriage and family life, work, citizenship, and the church. Luther actually operated with three orders, since family and work were combined in the feudal economy of his time. But each person, lay and clergy, are called to work in the world in these four different callings. In fulfilling their work gladly and conscientiously, they serve their neighbor. Plain, ordinary work is transformed into the Christian vocation as the Christian exercises his faith active in love. Work is no longer simply a job or occupation. It is a calling, a vocation. It is a summon from God that gives great purpose to life. Vocation is also where the Spirit sanctifies the Christian's life, not in a self-centered quest for perfection, but rather in humble service to the neighbor. Further, there is a mortification of the flesh involved in doing one's duty faithfully, doing one's calling faithfully. If the Christian pursues his vocation seriously, he will not have to search for the cross will find him. While Luther thought there were some occupations that were off limits to Christians, he accepted most worldly roles as useful to the neighbor. A Christian could be a soldier in a just war, and even a hangman in a just cause. One alleged weakness of the classic Lutheran teaching on vocation, however, was that it tended to accept uncritically the roles prescribed by the world. In such teaching, the Christian is to do what is prescribed by the world joyfully and generously. However, recent Lutheran interpretations of vocation are more dynamic. For example, Gustav Wingren, in his Luther on Vocation, argued not only that the orders of creation are dynamic and call for constructive change and criticism, but that in Christian vocation the two ways that God reigns in the world intersect. A Christian under the reign of God's gospel interjects the love and critical vision liberated by that gospel into one's worldly occupation, transforming it into a genuine vocation. Love, faith, hope have transformative effects. They function critically and constructively. Lutheranism, at its best, has incorporated more dynamic elements into its great teaching on vocation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope this clarified Luther's great teaching just a bit. Thank you.